Jesse James, 1847.
Outlaw, legend, or folk hero. Few names in American history stir up as much fascination as Jesse James. Was he a cold-blooded criminal or a rebel with a cause? Over 140 years later, his story still captures the imagination. Jesse James wasn't just any outlaw. He was a symbol of the lawless Wild West, leading a gang that pulled off daring bank and train robberies, and taunting authorities who tried to catch him. But Jesse's story didn't start with crime. It began in the chaos of the Civil War, where he learned the ways of violence and rebellion. In this video, we'll dive deep into Jesse's early years, his rise to criminal infamy, and how the brutal betrayal that ended his life only added to his legend. But the question remains, was Jesse James a hero of the South, or simply a ruthless bandit?
The story of Jesse James, America's outlaw legend.
Jesse Woodson James was born in 1847, in Kearney, Missouri, an ordinary boy born into extraordinary times. But Jesse's early life was far from peaceful. As a teenager, the American Civil War erupted around him, turning his world upside down. Missouri was a hotbed of conflict, torn between the Union and the Confederacy, and Jesse found himself drawn into the fight. The brutal tactics of the bushwhackers, raids, ambushes, and guerrilla warfare shaped Jesse's worldview. He learned how to fight, survive, and, most importantly, how to wage war against what he saw as Northern oppression. These violent years laid the foundation for the outlaw he would become. For Jesse James, the Civil War never truly ended. The bitterness and violence of those years would fuel his life of crime, turning him from soldier to outlaw, and setting the stage for his notorious criminal career. In the years following the Civil War, Jesse James and his brother Frank, along with the notorious younger brothers, set their sights on a new kind of battle, against the wealthy and the powerful. Their first target? The Clay County Savings Bank in Liberty, Missouri. On a cold February day in 1866, the James Younger gang committed what many believe to be the first daylight bank robbery in U.S. history. They rode into town with speed and precision, and in a matter of minutes, they had stolen over $60,000, escaping into the wilderness without a trace. This was only the beginning. Over the next decade, Jesse and Frank James, along with their gang, would terrorize the Midwest. They didn't just rob banks, they targeted trains and stagecoaches, challenging the very foundations of law and order. But it was Jesse James who became the face of the gang. He was daring, charismatic, and ruthless. The public was fascinated by this young, rebellious outlaw who defied the law, and he quickly grew into a legendary figure, both feared and admired. As Jesse James' criminal career escalated, so did his fame. But it wasn't just the robberies that captured the public's attention, it was the story crafted by the media, a narrative that transformed Jesse from outlaw to hero. Journalists in the 19th century weren't just reporting on Jesse James, they were mythologizing him. Articles painted him as a rebel fighting against Northern Reconstruction policies, a symbol of Southern defiance. Some even claimed he robbed from the rich to give to the poor, echoing the legend of Robin Hood. In reality, Jesse James wasn't robbing to help the poor, he was filling his own pockets. But the media's portrayal was powerful. Sensational journalism turned him into a folk hero for those who saw the Reconstruction era as oppressive, especially in the South. Though Jesse's crimes were violent and self-serving, to some, he became a symbol of resistance, fighting back against the very forces that were reshaping the post-Civil War South. The myth of Jesse James, the Robin Hood of the West, was born out of a complex blend of rebellion, nostalgia, and sensationalism. September 7, 1876, what should have been another daring robbery turned into a disaster. The James Younger gang's attempt to rob the First National Bank of Northfield would prove to be the gang's downfall. This time, the gang wasn't up against unarmed bank clerks. The people of Northfield fought back, guns blazing, store owners and townspeople firing at the gang as they tried to make their escape. The heist turned into a bloodbath. The Northfield raid was a catastrophe. The younger brothers were captured, and several members of the gang were killed. Jesse and his brother Frank managed to escape, but the gang, once feared across the Midwest, was shattered. As the gang fell apart, Jesse James' world began to close in on him. The life of fame and notoriety was now one of constant fear, evasion, and desperation. April 3, 1882, Jesse James, one of the most wanted men in America, thought he was safe. But behind him stood a man who would change his fate forever. Robert Ford, once a trusted member of Jesse's new gang, had other plans. For $10,000 in reward money, he betrayed his leader, firing a single shot that ended Jesse's life. Ford's betrayal wasn't just for money, it was also driven by the promise of fame. Killing the notorious Jesse James was a surefire way to make his name in history, but the act branded Ford as a coward. Jesse's death shocked the nation. The newspapers ran wild with the story, and overnight, Jesse James was transformed from outlaw to legend. In life, Jesse was feared and hunted. In death, he became an icon. His assassination by Robert Ford sealed his place in American folklore, where stories of outlaws and gunslingers would captivate generations. In life, Jesse James was a wanted man, feared and hunted. But in death, his name became immortalized in story, song, and film. Shortly after his death, Jesse's life was romanticized by writers eager to spin tales of rebellion and heroism. Dime novels painted him as a Robin Hood figure, a man who fought against Northern oppression and corporate greed. In truth, the reality of Jesse's life was much darker. The myth of Jesse James only grew with time, as Hollywood embraced his story. In the early 20th century, filmmakers brought the outlaw to the big screen, further solidifying his place as a folk hero. Films like Jesse James and The Great Northfield, Minnesota Raid shaped the public's perception of the man, often blurring the line between fact and fiction. Over the decades, Jesse James became more than an outlaw. He became a symbol of defiance, rebellion, and adventure. Artists, musicians, and filmmakers turned him into a larger-than-life figure, forever embedded in the fabric of American folklore. From dime novels to Hollywood blockbusters, the legend of Jesse James lives on. He's no longer just an outlaw, he's an American icon whose story will continue to captivate and inspire generations to come. From his early days as a Confederate guerrilla fighter, through his infamous reign as one of America's most wanted outlaws, to his transformation into a legendary folk hero, Jesse James lived a life that has captured the imagination of the world for over a century. His violent deeds, daring heists, and ultimate betrayal by Robert Ford are now the stuff of legend. But over time, Jesse James has come to represent more than just a criminal. His story has evolved into a tale of rebellion, adventure, and the spirit of freedom, elements that have helped cement his place in American folklore. Though Jesse James lived a life of crime, his legacy has become far larger. Today, he stands as a symbol of defiance, a figure whose myth often overshadows the truth. Was Jesse James truly an outlaw, or has he become a folk hero in the eyes of history? Let us know what you think in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe for more stories of legendary figures who've shaped history.